You ever look at a giant skyscraper or a sprawling hospital and just wonder, how does something that massive get built without completely falling into chaos? Well, it's not just about the cranes and the concrete. There's this invisible system, this unseen blueprint of rules and communication that's running the entire show. That system is called construction contract administration. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how it works.
And right off the bat, you need to understand the stakes here couldn't be higher. This quote says it all, really. You can have the most beautiful design and the most skilled builders in the world, but if the paperwork and communication break down, the whole thing can just collapse into a legal nightmare. It is that critical.
So what is it exactly? Well, think of contract administration as the project's central nervous system. It's not about just filing papers in a cabinet. It's the active, living process of managing every single promise, every requirement, and every conversation to make sure the physical building has a solid operational backbone holding it all together. So where does all this begin? You might think it's with the first shovel in the ground, but actually, the foundation for a successful project gets laid way before that, usually in a conference room. It all kicks off with this meeting, the pre-construction conference. This is where everyone, the owner, the architect, the contractor, all the key players, they all get into the same room to agree on the rules of the game. You can think of it like the project's constitutional convention. And just look at what they're hashing out. They're deciding exactly how they're going to talk to each other, who has the final say on decisions, how the money is going to flow, and crucially, what happens when things inevitably change. Getting everyone on the same page here is, well, it's everything. And this is where the human element really comes into play. If the owner walks in with this heavy-handed, confrontational attitude, it immediately puts everyone on the defensive for the next 2 years. But if they create a spirit of trust and teamwork from day one, you build an atmosphere where problems get solved before they even become problems. Okay, so the stage is set, the rules are agreed upon. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this all plays out day to day. Once construction actually starts, there's this constant flow of information that's absolutely essential to keep things moving. And this isn't just casual chatter, it's a formal, documented paper trail. The most common tool you'll see is the request for information, or what everyone calls an RFI. So picture this. A builder is on site, they're looking at a blueprint, and something just isn't 100% clear. They can't guess. That's a huge risk. So they submit a formal, written RFI to the architect to get an official clarification. It is the #1 way to solve uncertainty on a job site. Now you might be thinking, okay, it's a question. What's the big deal if a response is a little late? A day or two can't hurt that much, right? Wrong. So wrong. A single delayed answer to an RFI can set us a massive domino effect. A whole crew might have to stop what they're doing. Material orders get put on hold. The schedule starts to slip. And believe me, every single hour of delay costs a ton of money. This is why getting timely answers is absolutely non-negotiable. And RFIs are really just one piece of this puzzle. You've also got submittals. That's where contractors send over data on the exact materials they want to use so the architect can approve them. And then you have shop drawings, which are super detailed plans for anything that's custom-made, like steel beams or special cabinetry. Each one of these is a critical information lifeline that needs a formal sign-off to keep the project moving forward. Now, all of this information, all of this work, it all revolves around one thing, right? Money. And if you really want to understand the pressures of a construction project, you have to understand how contractors get paid. Here's something most people don't realize about the contractor's financial reality. They are not sitting on a big pile of the owner's cash. They are often paying their crews, their suppliers, their subcontractors, all out of their own pocket, sometimes for 30, even 60 days before they see a dime from the owner. So a single delayed payment isn't just an inconvenience. It can be a full-blown crisis that threatens their entire operation. So to get paid, the contractor basically has to build their case every single month. First, they start with what's called a schedule of values. That's the master budget for the project. Then they use a continuation sheet to show how much progress they've made against that budget. And finally, it all gets bundled into an official application for payment. Any little mistake here can push their payment back another whole month. And if that wasn't enough pressure, there's this little thing called retainage. What this means is the owner will typically hold back 10% of every single payment. That money, that 10%, is only released at the very, very end of the project, after everything is totally done.
It basically acts as a financial guarantee for the owner.
All right, let's be real. No matter how perfectly you plan, things change. Stuff happens. Delays are inevitable. So, how the contract handles these realities is another huge part of administration. Owners have two main tools to keep a project on schedule. You've got the stick and you've got the carrot. The stick is called liquidated damages. That's a daily fee the contractor has to pay for every single day they finish late. And the carrot? That's project incentives, bonuses for finishing early or for hitting other goals like safety or quality targets. Both are incredibly powerful motivators.
So, what happens when the owner decides they want to add something new, or the crew discovers an unexpected problem? You can't just make the change. It has to be official. It has to be documented through a change order. This is a formal, written amendment to the contract that officially adjusts the scope, the cost, or the schedule. It makes sure everyone is on the same page and that the contractor gets paid fairly for doing extra work. But what happens when that agreement breaks down? When you can't agree on a change order or there's a huge disagreement over who's responsible for a delay? Well, this is when things can get pretty ugly. So instead of jumping straight into an expensive lawsuit, most contracts build in a dispute resolution ladder. The whole point is to solve the problem at the lowest, cheapest rung possible. You start with mediation, where a neutral third party tries to help the two sides talk it out. If that doesn't work, you might move to a mini trial, and finally to binding arbitration, which is basically like a private court case. But here's the real takeaway from all of this. All those formal processes, the RFIs, the change orders, the dispute ladders, they're all backup plans. They exist for when communication fails. The absolute best way to run a project and to avoid all that headache is to build strong relationships and just have open, honest communication from the very beginning. You know, in the end, contract administration isn't just about documents and processes. It's about managing people and relationships. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question for the future. As our project management software gets smarter and more sophisticated, will technology ever truly be able to replace the simple human element of trust on a construction site? It's definitely something to think about.